From News Channel 9, your local election headquarters. This is a debate in the race for state senate in Central New York's 53rd District. Incumbent Democrat Rachel May and Republican challenger Sam Rodgers. Here now is your moderator, News Channel 9's Dan Cummings.
And hi everybody, welcome now to News Channel 9's debate in the 53rd State Senate District. This district, if you don't know or don't live in it, covers most of the city of Syracuse, several of its suburbs, and all of Madison County and part of Oneida County. The district has been represented for the last 2 years by Senator Rachel May, who will be found on the Democrat and Working Families Party lines on your ballot in November, or maybe you have your ballot, you'll find her there now. The challenger, Sam Rodgers, is an assistant DA in Madison County, a former long snapper and team captain for the Syracuse Orange. Mr. Rodgers has the Republican, Conservative, and Independence lines on your ballot. We are going to give each candidate 60 seconds to answer my opening question, and then we'll do rebuttal as time allows, and we'll have equal amounts of rebuttal going forward. And by virtue of a draw just before we started, the first question goes to candidate Sam Rodgers. Mr. Rodgers, COVID-19 has put the state and local governments in deep deficit that they may take some time to dig out of. Without any new federal stimulus money coming in yet, or so far, it's left a lot of Central New York families in deep debt as well. Jobs and job opportunities have disappeared. One way that's been proposed to pay for this is a tax on the wealthiest New Yorkers, perhaps the wealthiest 1%. Marginal tax increase on those people to raise a lot of money. Where do you stand on that as one way to bail out both the state and its people?
Well, first of all, thanks Dan and everyone at Channel 9 for hosting. Thank you, Senator, for being here. I disagree with the tax on the wealthy, and as you mentioned, it might be the top 1%, but in New York State, it's the top 1% that pay 40% of our income tax. So if we disincentivize those earners to go somewhere else, and as you said, in COVID, we actually have to get them to come back to New York. But if they don't come back or they go somewhere else, we don't only lose the marginal rate we're trying to skim off the top from them, but we lose everything underneath it. We lose their personal expenses, maybe their company, their jobs, their employees. That's a lot of tax dollars that our state budget relies on now. If we start chipping away at that, we'll be in a much worse position. As state senator, we have to look at what we can control. We hope the federal government comes in and gives our localities some money. Right now that hasn't happened, so I'm dedicated and committed to do what I can do as a state senator in this position.
Senator May, tax the super rich?
Well, I actually carry a bill to ultra-millionaires tax that would raise the marginal rate on people making $5 million a year or more. It's way less than 1% of the population. I think we have to ask them to pay their fair share. We've had income inequality rising rapidly in New York State. It's one of the most unequal states in terms of income, and a lot of these people have made a ton of money during the pandemic, so I think it's appropriate to ask them to pay their fair share so local property taxpayers aren't the ones left with the bill.
Mr. Rodgers, would you like to go around
respond that once those high earners leave, then it is us who are left with the bill. It's the middle class. It's the people that can't leave. These high earners are the most mobile in the whole state. Many of them already have houses elsewhere. Again, we're going to incentivize them to leave, and then the burden is felt on everyone else. And that would be disastrous, as we talked about. They carry a high burden for our tax structure, and we need to keep them here. People are leaving New York at an alarming rate, and we have to stop.
Well, are you not concerned about that aspect of your bill, Senator?
Typically the people who are leaving are not the top 1%, and they will come back. New York is the financial center of the world, and when there have been tax increases in the past, we have not seen flight of the super wealthy.
So Dan, if I may, the governor himself has said this is a bad idea. People are going to leave and they're not going to come back. It will hurt our state financially. It will hurt us financially, the ones who can't leave, who want to live here in Central New York. This would be a very unwise thing to do.
And you could say my bill has bipartisan sponsorship, co-sponsorship, and is extremely popular all over the state, so including upstate. And in fact, no one in upstate would pay this tax, actually.
Well, we'll get back in a moment to whether the governor might sign it or not and what could be done about that in Albany if he doesn't go along with the legislature. But for now, let me move Senator May to a question for you. You chair the Senate's Committee on Aging, and you've held hearings this summer. You've scrutinized the governor, the health department's COVID response. You've taken a hard look at Governor Cuomo's earlier policy of forcing nursing homes to take patients regardless of their COVID diagnosis. It proved to be highly controversial, and it probably proved to be very deadly for an untold number of older people and the spread of the virus in these long-term care facilities. What did we learn about the response to COVID, and are you in a position to criticize that now? What did you learn from these hearings about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking the question that way, because my approach to legislating is about learning from mistakes of the past, or just, we didn't know very much about the virus in March and April, so we needed to have try a lot of different options. The federal government was no help at all with containing the virus, and so it fell to the state of New York. And what we've learned is that we need better oversight over the nursing homes, we need better infection control, and the other thing I've been working really hard on is visitation. So once the virus is controlled in the nursing homes, allowing people safely to come in and visit people in the nursing homes, because what we're seeing is mortality rising because of isolation and a lack of just the personal care that people need. So those have been the lessons that I've taken from it.
Sam Rodgers?
Yeah, I would say one thing we did know at the beginning of the pandemic was how devastating it could be to our elderly population or those with pre-existing conditions, a lot of whom are congregated in nursing homes. And I'm sharing the stage today with the chair of the Aging Committee, possibly the person best positioned in New York State to stand up to the governor and say something about his tragic policy that forced nursing homes to take these patients in. And she said nothing. She said that we need, and what she learned was there has to be more nursing home oversight. Well, on her website, she says, as chair of the Aging Committee, her role is nursing home oversight. That didn't happen. It was devastating. It was tragic. It was an illogical policy that was not questioned. We need to have people that are willing to question the governor and say, how can we collaborate? How can we come up with a better solution? Because on its face, this will not work.
Senator.
Right. So we have to remember the context in March and April, when we could see tragedy unfolding in Italy, where there were not enough beds in hospitals and people were being turned away, especially seniors were being turned away. So I think the governor's analysis that what was happening, this was in the nursing homes way before that executive order happened. There were what we found out in our hearings was a lot of the nursing home staff are going from nursing home to nursing home because we don't pay them enough and they have to work double shifts. And that was the real initial cause probably of the spread. In fact, a Yale study has shown that probably 42% of the deaths could have been eliminated if we had been having safer staffing, better staffing levels, which is something I've been working on since I took office. And it's a long-term and difficult process that we have to get through.
One more go around on this.
Yeah,
Sam
so
Rodgers.
in March, again, what we knew is how devastating it could be on the elderly population. What the senator just said she knew is how the staff was underserved and underprotected, and still said nothing when this happened. My opponent and her delegation started saying, we need to get people out of prisons, okay? Coronavirus could go through prisons like crazy, but then we're forcing people into nursing homes. She's positioned to say something about it, and she didn't say anything, and I think that's a lack of duty.
Senator, you get the last word.
I just want to say it's easy to be an armchair quarterback with 20/20 hindsight, but there were real fears at that time, and we did not know a lot about how to control the virus. And I'm sure the governor wouldn't do the same thing again, but we have to learn from it, and the whole point right now is to move forward and make sure the next wave that we get is we do a better job.
Well, let me broaden it. Go ahead.
I would
quickly.
just add, the governor wouldn't do it again if he was questioned and if the conversation happened of what's the best way to tackle this situation.
Do you feel, Senator, you held the governor accountable this year?
We've done a lot to hold the governor accountable. We rolled back rulings about immunity in nursing homes. We held the hearings. So the Commissioner of Health was there for hours testifying. So twice, actually. The governor has extreme powers in a state of emergency, and so there is a limit to what
yes, and since you brought it up as my next question, and we'll put it directly to Sam Rodgers to begin with, Governor Cuomo has, by and large, run the state by executive order this year when it comes to the pandemic. Are you concerned about the loss generally of legislative oversight, if not specifically on the aging and the nursing homes? But has the legislature itself, both parties, both houses, been marginalized by the governor's actions, by his control of this? And do we need to rebalance the power between the legislative branch and the governor's office?
Absolutely, we need to rebalance. But what we see in New York today is because of a choice of the legislature. The beginning of March, they gave the governor unilateral power to determine what's going to happen in the state for coronavirus. The most critical thing our legislature could have faced ever while they were elected, they decided we want no part of it. The governor can do what he wants. Same thing with the budget. They passed a budget and then gave the executive the authority to just make cuts on his own, not reporting to the legislature. That hurts Central New York because we elect someone to go and represent us. And I want to touch on the nursing home hearings that happened. They did not find out anything. There were no subpoenas. The questions were not hard. I'm an assistant district attorney. If I walked into a hearing and didn't subpoena the witnesses and the documents that I need to present that case, the judge would look at me like, what are you doing?
All right. I want to move beyond those hearings, though, to the general picture of power balance in Albany, Senator May. You've been there for 2 years now. You've seen it with Democratic majorities in both houses and the governor and now the pandemic. Do we need to rebalance this a little bit?
Absolutely, we need to rebalance this. But let me just go back to March. So that decision to give him additional powers was fully bipartisan. It was almost unanimous. And it came at a moment when we knew this was a very fast-moving train that we were facing, and we needed somebody who could make quick decisions. So I would make that vote again. I do think that the Constitution gives the governor far more power than any other state constitution does or the federal government does in making the budget in particular. And we are going to be working on this. Is going to be one of the first things we want to work on, is making sure that we rebalance that, so that, because the legislature in the Constitution is given the responsibility to fund education and infrastructure and all of that, but we're not given the power to do it.
Let me start with you on this next question then, Senator May. It relates directly to this last question. One-party rule in Albany. It's likely to continue unless something extraordinary happens between now and November 3rd. Democrats right now hold 40 of the 63 seats in the Senate, and you only need to pick up 2 more to win a veto-proof supermajority. Would that be good for New York and its taxpayers? Would you actually want that in the Senate, to have a veto-proof supermajority, to be able to take some of that control back? Is that what you're hoping for?
You know, even if we have that majority, it's a very diverse conference, and it will be a rare moment, I think, where we can have total unanimity of overriding a governor's veto. But I do think there are times when it's appropriate to do that, on this issue in particular, I think. In general, I would say it's been a good thing for the state that the Democrats have had control of the Senate for the first time in really about 80 years, because we passed a lot of things that had been languishing forever. And the reason people are going to be able to vote early starting this week is because we passed early voting. It was the first vote I took in the Senate. And that was one of the many things that had been stalled for decades in our New York State Senate.
Mr. Rodgers, on the same point of a supermajority for the Senate, one-party control in Albany.
It would be a bad thing. Our government is set up to encourage compromise. This session, we've seen the governor actually veto more bills when the Senate was controlled by Democrats than he did when it was controlled by Republicans. We are at a time right now facing COVID where state policy is on a collision course. We have our economy, restrictions, and COVID. We have an uptick in crime and considering criminal justice. We have the labor rights of our workforce and our farms. We need someone who's going to dive in and thoughtfully consider those questions. My opponent has voted with downstate every vote that she's taken. I looked at the records, I printed it out. her record and the downstate coalition, took the names off, they look the exact same. We need someone who's going to represent Central New York as we move forward, because when we jump to our political sides, everyone gets harmed and we get steamrolled by downstate. I will go to the state Senate and work relentlessly to represent Central New York.
Okay, well, let's look at diving in, because one of the things we did, we have really changed the way decision making is done in Albany. We have held more hearings, I think 5 times more hearings in 2019 that had been held in when the Republicans were in charge of the Senate. I brought hearings here. We had 4 of them in my district. We have dived in very carefully. And the reason that I voted with my colleagues is we achieved consensus because I was at the table weighing in and saying, this is what upstate needs in this bill. And all of those bills went through iterations where we were changing them because of the deep dive that I was doing in this district and the voices we were hearing from Central New York that were weighing in and giving us information about what matters here in this district. So I am proud of the deep dive that we've done.
Well, let me go this way with it, and this goes to Sam Rodgers first. If you are elected, you will enter a House which is already well controlled by Democrats. You would be a minority dissenting voice. Is it good for the 53rd to have another rookie who not only isn't a rookie, but is playing for the team that doesn't even have as many players? You know what I mean? You go in, what can you get done for the district as a member of the minority party?
Absolutely. I'll be a representative, again, that represents the district, that seeks to represent the whole district. And what we've seen this past year is a legislature that has just given their power away, given it to the governor. And when the governor's making unilateral decisions, we get harmed. I've talked to many businesses during this COVID pandemic that have been people in tears just watching the governor squeeze out their whole industry and asking, where are our state representatives? Why aren't they calling? I'm going to go in there, ask our constituency, what do you need and how can I help you? And I've done that in the past. I was elected a team captain of the Syracuse football team. Very diverse group. I'm in this position today because I can go into a room and make allies. I can collaborate. I'll have the discussions. I enjoy talking to people who disagree with me because it informs my position. I like to seek to understand, and that's what I'll do on behalf of everyone in Central New York. I'll bring energy, I'll go to the state Senate and say, I'm here for the people of Central New York, and I'm excited to represent them.
Senator May, you've got 60 seconds to talk about being in the majority, I guess.
Right, so I actually have been able to be really effective in just 2 years in the Senate. I not only chair the Aging Committee, I chair the Commission on Rural Resources. We've done a lot about farm to table, farm to school kind of connections. I've done advocacy about rural home health care, and we just found out last week that the state is going to change the way they reimburse that, and that's going to keep more people in their jobs. I was voted Environmental Legislator of the Year by environmental advocates this week too, because I've been able to pass laws to protect our fresh water resources, which are so important here in Central New York. I was able to pass a bill that allows the industrial development agencies to provide grants and loans to small businesses and nonprofits so they can stay open or reopen here in the pandemic. And in Syracuse alone, I think they've allocated $300,000 to over 50 small employers. And did I mention I've had 23 bills signed into law? So that's a pretty big deal for a first-term senator. Oh, and I got the governor to fund a regional high school of the arts in STEM in Syracuse that is going to serve our whole region. It was a big deal.
All right, our next question begins on a specific issue, and it starts with Senator May. Is there any aspect of the police reform legislative package and combination of executive orders that you disagree with? Both the legislature and the governor all by himself did several things this year in the wake of some very high-profile police misconduct across the nation to reform the way policing is done in New York State at the state and local level. You voted for the package of reforms. Is there any piece of either that legislative package or the governor's orders that are still rolling out that you disagree with? And
I voted for the package because we really needed more accountability. We needed to be able to trust the police. We needed the black community in particular to be able to trust the police. And if they were using chokeholds and racial profiling, various kinds, that it was really hard to achieve that kind of trust. So I was talking with the chief of police in Syracuse, and he supported the repeal of 50A because he wants people to know that the police are being held accountable and are accountable. So yes, I supported that legislation, but the way it works in the legislature, and what I'm proud of what we do with the hearings that we hold, is you pass a bill and then you do your due diligence and you make sure that all the stakeholders can weigh in and tell you, is this working, is it not working, and you make changes, as we did, for example, with early voting.
Mr. Rodgers, police reform, the bills that were passed, the executive orders that were made, do you disagree with any of them?
I want to talk about how we got in this situation, and part of that is the bail reform laws that my opponent voted for and on the Senate floor said these are the best laws that we could possibly have. And I want to tell you why that should be offensive to us, because she didn't talk to our elected officials. She didn't talk to sheriffs, didn't talk to district attorneys and judges, people that we elect to keep us safe, people that should be at the table when we're looking at how can we make criminal justice fair for everyone. As a prosecutor, I talked to my colleagues and we would have all said, yeah, there's room to reform bail, but no one talked to us. My opponent has been a lifelong educator, and this would be like if one of her students submitted a paper and said, this is the best paper I've ever written, and only cited Wikipedia. That's the kind of legislation that we got because the far left is just reaching for progressive legislation to pass and experimenting with our public safety.
Senator May?
Yeah, well, first of all, the bail reform and the police reforms were very different things. And I stand by both of them, but the bail reform itself was the product of years of dialogue between all the stakeholders and wasn't like something we pulled out of our back pocket. The situation that prompted the bail reform was we had young people in New York State who might be picked up for a small misdemeanor, and they were being put in jail for an unlimited period of time awaiting trial because they couldn't pay $500 in bail. And meantime, a wealthy doctor accused of murder could go free because he could pay the bail. So it was a system that was designed to discriminate, and it ended up discriminating particularly against people of color, and set up the kind of situation where now we have the distrust between the communities of color and the police, and then the police reforms become necessary.
So the bail reform, let's just look at the statistics of what have happened this year. Since that has passed, shooting victims in Syracuse has gone up 136%. This isn't people arrested, this is people hit with bullets. Burglaries have gone up in Strathmore, in the university neighborhoods. I've talked to people in Eastwood who have said, we're afraid because they're going to start happening here next. Organizations that sell drugs have been almost impossible to stop because you can't break a chain. It's those laws that have built the tension so high that got us to the situation we're in. I'm excited to step in as somebody that can bring people together. I was elected a captain of the Syracuse football team. I've went and talked and met people on the south side of Syracuse, the west side of Syracuse, and they say, we need a bridge builder. We need someone that can talk to both groups. I work with police officers and I work with people in those communities, and we need someone who can bring people together.
I need to ask you specifically, and we'll wrap up with this question. Mr. Rodgers, you've expressed opposition to the part of the reform that allows an individual police officer's disciplinary record to be released, 50A as Senator referred to. You would only release the full unit's record within the department. How would that work to let the public know about an officer who's been disciplined appropriate?
Right. Again, this 50A law was one that had been sitting there for a long time and then was just passed on the emotion of the moment. I say we should look at it, and instead of letting an individual officer's record be public, because that puts, harassment into the situation, unwanted outcomes, why not make the whole unit's record public? Because then we actually get the culture change that we seek. When I was on the Syracuse football team, we had two types of rules. One rule, only the perpetrator had to wake up and run at 6 in the morning. That didn't affect a lot of change because most people would say, that's not me, I don't behave like that.
I need to give the senator 40 seconds to respond.
Right, so let's go back to what you said about bail, because there has been a spike in shootings, but there's been a spike in shootings in every state in the country, red states, blue states. It has to do with the pandemic and the racial justice issues and what the White House is sending out in terms of stoking white supremacy. So we have blaming that on the bail reform is just totally disingenuous and false. And all that does is make people more afraid.
We better leave it there because
okay.
I need to let both of you get to your closing statements. We've agreed to give each candidate 60 seconds to address you directly, and we'll start with a closing statement from candidate Sam Rodgers. Mr. Rodgers.
Yes, well, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. This race can be boiled down to one question. When something you care about is on the line, because it will be, whether it's your job, your family's safety, your child's education, which one of us do you want to take the place on the Senate floor and make the case for your family and for Central New York? I'm a former captain of the Syracuse football team. More notably, I met my wife Jenna at Syracuse. She was a captain of the soccer team. After we graduated, we bought a house in Syracuse, and I went to Cornell Law School. Then we had a decision to make. Do we want to chase the trends and leave Central New York? And we said no, we want to stay here because we believe that we can inspire and encourage other people to chase their dreams right here in Central New York. This is a critical election. This is a critical election, but you should not feel threatened by that. This is an opportunity to elect someone in this seat that could make a really big difference for Central New York. My name is Sam Rodgers, and I'm asking for your vote.
Senator May, you have 60 seconds.
Right, thank you, and thank you for doing this. So it has been the honor of my life to serve the 53rd Senate District for the last 2 years. I'm proud of what we've been able to do, both because of the leadership that I've been entrusted with in the Senate and also because of the many things that we have accomplished. Legislatively, as I said, early voting, the Child Victims Act, we passed the best climate bill that has passed in any state in the country, and that's something that matters deeply to our future, the future of our young people. I've also been able to bring resources to this district in addition to the STEAM school that we're going to be able to build. We just had word yesterday that $750,000 are going to libraries to help them. So we've done a huge amount, and my staff has helped 1,200 people get their unemployment insurance. So I'm very proud of how we have helped this district, and I look forward to 2 more years. I ask for your vote so that I can keep up this job.
Thank you, Senator May. Thank you, Sam Rodgers, for a spirited and a wonderful debate. Clearly, the people in the 53rd have a choice to make, and we invite you to make that choice. And you can do it early, of course. As we've mentioned, early voting in Onondaga County and statewide begins on Saturday, October 24th. We encourage you, if you're enrolled and registered in the, registered, enrollment doesn't matter. Vote in the 53rd and for every position on the ballot. We thank you for joining us here on News Channel 9, and we'll see you soon at your local election headquarters.